Each month in 2020, Agile PDX is taking one of the 12 Agile principles and exploring what they mean for our work today, both inside and outside of software. In May, we explored the fifth principle: build projects around motivated individuals, give them the environment and support they need, and trust them to get the job done. We failed to start the recording right at the beginning, and our facilitator posed the following to kick off the discussion. Trust is often hard to define, but easy to describe. Can you share examples of when trust was present and examples of when it wasn't?
I'll just say, as far as how we define trust, it's kind of this. I've got a firm belief or a confidence that you can do something for me, right? And that I believe that you're going to, that what I'm going to get from you, what responses, what you tell me is going to be accurate and consistent with the results that we'll see from you. So I think that's a good thing to clarify first, is what does it really mean to trust? Yeah, I've got some confidence in you. I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt that what you tell me is true, and I'll take it and expect it to be consistent with your actions.
Mm-hmm. I want to add to Steve's comment. Thanks, Leo. For me, it's not I trust you to deliver. It's I trust you to ask questions when you don't know what to do, and not to make an assumption. I trust you to do the discovery and find out. That I've found, I found that to be so critical, because especially project leaders, they're not expected to know how to solve the problem. It's their job to lead a group in solving that problem and to facilitate more than anything else. And trust for me is I trust you to have, I trust you to be a good collaborator, trust you to ask for help, and I trust you to treat everyone with respect. And that's the foundation for me.
Mm-hmm. May I continue? We at work at LEAP, we have what we call like principles, like there are principles everywhere now. And the first one is actually trust over control. So maybe I will reply while comparing to control. And it doesn't mean that we try to be more on the trust side than the control side. It doesn't mean that we do that all the time, but the fact that we have that, it forces us to, okay, what am I doing? Am I controlling too much, or kind of, yeah, I trust that person to do the job? And so to answer your question, Neil, some teams, for sure, you can see the way they interact, in the way they share, that the trust level are kind of higher. Don't even know if it makes sense to say trust level, but and for sure I know some other teams where it's not the same level, and it's quite obvious in their interactions and all they share, and even just the energy in the room, basically.
Okay, April, did you want to try again?
How's my audio?
It's better.
Okay. I think the key with trust is that you need to offer it before you can expect to receive it. And too often I find leaders who say they should earn my trust. Well, unless you're being very specific about what they can do to do that, and unless you're role modeling, how they can trust you, it becomes this sort of like, let's just wait and hope. So we can do much better if we say, here are the aspects of your technical competence or your business competence I have concerns in. And if you can demonstrate to me this level, to Leo's point, this level, then I can trust you that it's safe and you can be successful. But we as leaders should be very explicit around those things. Otherwise, it leaves people not really knowing what to do to help move everything forward.
Totally correlates in the fact of giving. I've done that many times with people, like consciously giving again my trust to people who somehow had some data that I couldn't trust them anymore, but being conscious and doing it on purpose. And then at some point I noticed that people, they really realize that I really mean it, that I really care, and it works. At some point, like, okay, this guy really cares, and he's still giving me his trust, so I will do my best somehow to collaborate with him.
I think one way of determining or being able to see, right, if you know, is this, if you look at a team, is this team trusted? I think a sign that they probably are being trusted is, you know, let's say it's a Scrum team. Probably most everybody's familiar with Scrum teams around here. The Scrum team goes into the sprint review. They do their demonstration, right? The stakeholders who are there are people who manage the people in the room. They're other business and technical stakeholders. They're there showing interest, but what they're doing throughout this exchange is they're asking questions. Not telling what needs to be done, but asking questions. What if? Did you think about this? That's really interesting what you just showed us. Have you considered this? And then they let the team kind of figure that out. A product owner who can say, we considered this and this and this. What do you think? And well, then the stakeholders' response is, well, those are both good options. Make a recommendation, right? We would like to see what your recommendation is. So that would be a sign of maybe there's some decent trust going on between a team and the people who are impacted or impacting what's going on.
It makes me think of product owners who would write too much in a story because they don't trust the development team to get the job done. For sure, you can totally relate to that.
I want to add to Leo, when a PO dictates how to solve the problem, not just what the requirements are. This is where I often see that trust deteriorate because the development team doesn't feel respected or trusted to solve the problem in the way that is best. They're ticket takers at that point. I've ordered this software with a side of fries, please do just that, which may not actually be the right solution. And unless you have a product owner that is, I mean, I've never met a product owner that knows how to do all of that with accuracy while not aggravating the developers. So you have to trust your people to solve the problem in the way that's right. And there's so much respect that has to happen between the development team and the PO. I think you hit it right there.
Yeah, I think to sum up, we have kind of trust inside the team, and we have trust in the team by outsiders. And within the team, if we're not able to trust each other, from what I'm hearing from the panel, there's a bit of a disconnect until you can gain others' trust. And if you start by giving trust, it helps to build trust within the team faster. Did I summarize that? Catch a key point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll add one more thing on it, which is oftentimes I see in large projects, trust between teams also needs to be addressed. Which is, if one team is working on something, but they don't trust the data they're getting from another team, or they don't trust that the team they're going to give something to is going to use it correctly, they build in all kinds of hedges and issues or communication delays. So I've actually worked hard to try and have teams be able to express that level of trust to each other as well and specify why. If you don't trust, you need to give me a reason why. You can't say it's a feeling. You don't get to stop at feelings. And so that's a great way of getting them back to core, which is, well, you know, they gave us the data and it wasn't in the right format and it didn't have these things. So now I have a checker I built that checks their data. Well, that's waste and delays and other things. So we need to be more specific between teams.
Yeah, why do I have a 30-page spreadsheet to validate the data? Might be a little lack of trust. But what are some examples of a team that you have seen that had trust while getting the job done, overcome an obstacle or overcome what might appear to be an insurmountable issue? And what role did trust play in that?
I have one of those POs that knows everything. So he actually is a really good resource, but sometimes you need to kind of tamp him down a little bit. But the team I have, I inherited them, so I think I must be the lucky Scrum Master because they work well. They're still siloed, but they're starting to do a lot more peer programming and getting more in tune to working together because we just added another person too. And I think there's a lot of trust there. And it took them a while to trust me, but I think we've got a really good group now, and it's just a matter of just keep, helping and grooming them and refining them, whatever you want to call it, and focusing them. And like I said, I think I'm one of the lucky ones. So
I'm curious if anyone else has had this experience with a team where a new person arrives, and rather than they don't just get plugged in. In fact, everybody's trust goes down a little, trying to see, well, how do we feel about this new person? Do we trust them? Do they trust us? Are they going to try and change the relationship and the team dynamic that we have between us? Teams evolve over time, and they're never the same, and you can never recreate it. And I'm wondering if anyone's seen that happen.
It's actually a standard thing that happens in all kinds of teams. Anytime you introduce a new person, there's a new dynamic. And so if you know anything about team formation with the norming, storming, all of that, those 4 components, the team actually goes through all of them again.
Yeah, and building on what Robin said, there was a great training I went to years ago, and the trainer inserted one more step in that forming, storming, norming flow. He actually called it storing. And so sometimes you get teams where rather than dealing with something, they like put it in the freezer and want to hide it. They put it like back behind everything else. And then a new person shows up and they open the freezer and they go, hey, what's this tool we use to check the data instead of just trusting the other team? And everybody goes, put it down, put it back, put it back. So sometimes you can use a new person to overcome, maybe you've got a giant freezer and you're storing a lot of stuff in there rather than dealing with it. So that I challenge some teams, if you're seeing that downgrade, it's probably they're touching on some of that stuff that's stored too. I don't know what we should call that. Maybe trust debt.
Ooh, I like
buy
it.
down your trust debt. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I have something about the team organized Agile Tour Zurich. It's a conference, like a yearly conference. By the way, you are all invited. Feel free to come. Let me know. And so that about the question about the team that gets the job done, it relied a lot on me and my kind of co-founder. And so we had every year we have 1-2 new team members. It's the first time that they organize a conference. And then they're like, well, it seems really a big task, which is the case. But then when we have done that, I'm doing that for a few years. And so we are the 2 fuels of trust that, okay, don't worry, we're going to make it. Focus on that, do that. And I consciously, I'm a president of the association of, what does it mean? I don't know. Just I have my name somewhere on the paper. But I consciously like protect the team from the control, again, if I go back to control. And so I inject a lot of stress. We're going to make it, we're going to make it, we're going to make it. And we have goals, weekly goals. Okay, we're going to make it. And then when we do it, at the end of the day, they're like, wow, we've done it. We're like, yeah, sure. So consciously injecting trust, kind of.
Mm-hmm. Positive reinforcement of trust.
Yes, reinforcement, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's a really key piece to focus on in this principle. And I kind of want to move us on to build projects around motivated individuals. First and foremost, what does it mean to be building a team of motivated individuals?
To me, it's about what we do at LEAP where I work. We do holacracy, and so like you have roles that have purposes. Then purposes are part of circles or teams. That teams have purposes, and then the organization has a purpose. So we do that to build projects around motivated individuals. That's when we recruit them. Basically, we try to find people who have purposes that are kind of aligned with what we do, and then they are just naturally motivated because they are many of their deep values are connected to what we want to achieve together. So we connect the purpose from the person to the roles, to the teams, to the circles, and to the organization. And then you have naturally, I would say, we do all of us, we do way more things because also we can. But really, like I see a massive difference compared to, I would say, so to say, a normal company.
Yeah, I think the way these principles are worded is really interesting, and it's deliberate. And this one is no exception. Build projects around motivated individuals. Again, this is about the people. We're not going to fit the people around something else. We're going to fit everything around our people. And so this is another one of those focusing on individuals and interactions in order to get the projects or the product built. But it is building things around people. And that's a good, if that was all you took away from this principle, makes you think, okay, are we building around our people? That could be a good question to ask ourselves often. Are we building around our people?
And there's the piece in all of this, which is standard behavior says project and then choose the right, and I'm going to put right in these quotes, right people. And as we deal with inclusion and diversity of thought, this notion of right is inherent with biases. So I love this principle because if you say, okay, the business has project A, who is curious and excited by project A? If you ask that of people, even if you let them apply instead of like anybody who raises their hand is immediately on, say you're in a partial control environment, you're not all the way to holacracy. If I just let my 10 people raise hands for who's interested in project A, I've got data I didn't have before. And if I instead was going through and picking the right people, how certain am I that my right is really calibrated against the project? So it's a great opportunity, I think, in living this out tactically to be able to say, the business needs project A, but who's interested, who's excited? And then if, say, Liz doesn't raise her hand and I assumed Liz was the right people, I can then go to Liz and say, hey, when we offered project A, you didn't raise your hand. Can I ask you why? It could be project A really does excite her, but she's got a quarter coming up and she's going to be the adjunct professor and she just can't take on project A on top of B and C and D and professoring. And again, if I just assign people, I don't learn that. So I think from a leadership perspective, there's a huge opportunity in tactically doing this to learn a lot about your people and what motivates them, not just subscribe to the principle.
Really, sorry, Robin.
That's okay. And asking the question, who's curious? That's a huge thing. That curiosity piece is the piece that drives people to have motivation around it, and also to be more innovative and open with what they have to say to you about it.
Mm-hmm. April, I love that you brought this up because this is very similar to what I was going to share, which is how we do this tactically at Smarsh, how we assign projects, in that we have a purpose as a team. Leo, you talked about purpose. We have a purpose as a team. We all know why we're there. And so when something comes into our intake, basically, this little holding area, we go, ooh, that's interesting. And as time goes on, depending on how big the organization is and how big the teams are, some people build relationships or specialization to be able to help the marketing group very well, or the legal team and the InfoSec team. And so as a group with purpose, we look in on these things, and the team starts to build this sense of whose skills would best fit this, but it's never an assignment. It's a, hey, we think you'd be good at this. Can you take a look? And then the project manager, because I have a team of project managers, they are titled that way, and they have to commit, yes, I want to work on that. And if they don't want to work on that, the team talks about it and decides where else that could go. And sometimes we challenge it and say, we don't think this fits our charter. We think we can accomplish this with other means, or maybe we just coach and consult rather than actually run the project. Bigger company, probably easier to say, who's interested? Who wants to hang out? Smaller company, I have smaller resources, and so I have to kind of navigate this, but the team understands their purpose, and they know that once that ball comes into our court, somebody's got to deal with it. And sometimes they pair and help each other, but they understand that we deliver outcomes as a team, and they don't, like, it's a good way to get the ego out of it as well, to let them pick.
And then when they pick it, because like it's aligned with their purpose, like they pick it so quickly. They're like, shit, that's my shit, and I will take it, and that's quite amazing. We do at Leap, that's the same. We have requests from clients, and many times we refuse because there is no team to work on it. But when a team wants to work on it, well, that's suddenly the level of commitment is not the same.
Just
Go ahead.
okay.
D.
I just point out, like, I think that these, having motivated people who are really excited about the project really helps build trust in the team as well. So these things are definitely related. I've certainly had experiences being in very competitive environments, or where there's a team that is viewed as like the top team and the team you want to get on. This, never mind what the project is, you just want to get to this team. That really degrades trust. So I think brought up some very good points, and I just see these things as related. It depends why people are motivated to do the work, and there are certain people who can be on a team that are motivated by things that are going to be very difficult to maintain trust around. So it's kind of one of the things that I'm thinking about in this discussion.
It actually brings up a good question. What role does the motivation of the challenge of applying the skills of the individual contribute to the solution play in the application of this principle? So if somebody doesn't have the skills but is curious to explore the opportunity, how does that play into this?
I think that's a trait of a team member that makes this such a powerful opportunity, is intellectually curious people who want to come in. They'll come in each day with the attitude of, hey, excuse me, how can I expand my contribution today a little bit further than I was able to contribute yesterday? Because mostly what we're dealing with is we're solving new problems. If you're trying to find agile ways of doing things to solve the same problem every day, you don't need to be doing that, right? There's another approach to that. There's a more defined control method for that. So mostly what we're dealing with, and why we're having these challenges that bring us to these agile principles, is because we're trying to solve new problems all the time. And that requires curiosity. It requires willingness to experiment and try new things. And if that type of thing doesn't motivate me, then I'm probably in the wrong place. And I don't say that to mean that that's probably a bad thing. They may not be a bad thing. It could be that some other things motivate me. So I think there has to be a fit there, right? Am I motivated by that type of curiosity and stepping out into the dark each day and not knowing everything every day? But if we're solving new problems all the time, that's the type of thing that probably should be a motivator for the people coming together for that effort.
The other thing is when you have someone who doesn't necessarily they're not a fit, it may be something that they truly are really interested in and they've not had the opportunity. And as a leader, it's your opportunity to help grow someone.
So that connects us with give them the environment and support the need, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That's the other part there.
Well, and that linking of maybe an expert with someone new who's passionate can solve two problems at once. So it can both train the newer person in some of the expert skills, but also break the expert out of some of that expert entrainment of the way I always solve this is. And so that's where there's great double benefit out of creating those pairs and making explicit that challenge, which is I expect you to teach her something, but I expect you to open up to new potentials because of the question she asks.
Yeah, that's always a good opportunity for enlightenment, is the questions that someone new asks about your domain of expertise may lead you to think in different ways. That's so key. What happens to the work that isn't challenging but must be done to deliver the product? It's not necessarily motivating, but it has to get done.
Could these be considered things that sometimes don't get done on time because nobody wants to do them?
Yeah. Well, and you can also gamify them, right? Which is if this is something that's keep the business running that no one likes, let's have an automation contest. You know, who can come up with the most elegant way of eliminating this from our flows? That's a fun way of sort of challenging people to get rid of it instead of passing around that dirty job.
I like what Daniel Pink says about motivation, right? We remove money from the table, then what's left that motivates. I think it resonates with me, you know, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And purpose here, I think the purpose part can be a factor. And that is, you know, why would we work on anything where we don't understand why? So even if it might seem trivial, maybe these things don't challenge me much, but our stakeholders, our product owner, whoever it is, has made it clear why we need to do that. What is the real purpose? And there is a purpose that resonates with me behind it. Well, then that's going to motivate me differently than if you just tell me it has to be done. And we do it because we always have done it, and I don't understand why, then I don't want to do it, and I'm going to put it off. But if I can understand the why, that also challenging, saying, hey, we're going to get better results out of our people if we always understand the why. That's going to challenge us to now challenge, okay, is this a compelling enough why now that we've looked at it for it to be even be there? That can be a pretty powerful thing.
I would add to that, I've used pride in teams about those tasks that are not that funny to do. And by making that we were not really good at solving that, like, okay, shit, we know we can do better. And so it's basically measuring and showing that we can do better. And it's, even if we all knew that for example, we had some bugs and that we need to manage and we were not managing them fast enough. Even if everyone knew, just the fact, of course, like we know to make them visible suddenly by magic, yeah. Suddenly we are more motivated to solve that because we cannot accept that.
Liz, it looked like you were going to say something. Nope. Okay.
No.
Sorry.
I was very much agreeing with Steve about Dan Pink.
Yeah, I think we all enjoy his work and learn from it. What are some ways that you have successfully, or some examples of things that you have dealt successfully with using gamification or other ways to convince people that, like Leo said, making the work visible? Are there other ways that we've seen that work to help motivate around this work that is drudgery or doesn't have a visible why?
Well, it's a classic, but I've used the pairing because suddenly it's a game to pair. Even if, and sometimes we do a lot of pairing in some of the teams I take care of. And many times, I don't know why, we forget and suddenly we do it again. And we're like, okay, actually, it's kind of cool. And so it's part of the game. I feel like pairing is a game. And so we have a reflex when it's boring. Okay, just pair. And suddenly, by magic, it's cool.
I love that. That's a great idea.
Yeah. The third part of this is give them the environment and the support they need. How do you determine the environment and the support that they need? Where do you start with that?
Should always ask them. That's a good place to start, I think. Context and asking and looking around is everything. And conversely, if you don't ask them and you assume, you might actually be solving the wrong problem or making their environment more challenging. A team might really love doing things the way they do things, and you as a coach might go, but that's not the way to do it. And you might impose a change that doesn't actually give any value and doesn't create the environment for them to do their best work. So always ask.
I would add just also listen. I mean, just as a developer, like for coming off of a team recently where we would have tech debt items that we'd identify and go through that process. And a year later, they're like, they're never prioritized, and so these are the kinds of things that maybe like, when you're interacting with a customer, you understand why that happens. But from the team's perspective, these are pain points and you're just constantly bumping into them every day that you're working. Whereas when you're at the management level, it may not be as obvious what a impediment they are. So I think, from my perspective, at least, really listening to what the team's saying and the team being able to see that there's movement on the issues that they take the time to raise in retros and things.
To me, a key question is, what do you need? It's a key question we use a lot in Holacracy, and that's really a magic question to go directly, what do you need? You can complain, or for example, if they don't have the environment or the support they need, I don't care, what do you need? So I push back all the time to make them responsible and to make them phrase what they need. And of course, I will help them to solve their problems, but many times we're like, well, I can solve it, but I think it's better that you solve it. So, okay, we discuss right now, but then you still have the ball and you have to push it through. It's your tension.
Yeah, I had a colleague that I worked with at one point in time who constantly was asking the team to bring 3 options. You have something that's an impediment to you. Bring me 3 options for how to fix it. If you can think of 3 options, you should be able to fix it on your own pretty much. But if you can bring 3 options, then we have a choice situation, and it's no longer about upper management having to come up with a solution. They now have to make a choice of the things that's presented to them. So it's not like I can say no to everything, because there's a lot of choice.
It's like you force the third way.
Having that escalation path, for where where a team doesn't have control over something, right? And we want to decentralize. We want to, as leaders, we want to be giving them as much autonomy to resolve those things. And that's what you were just talking about, Neil. That's great, right? Give me options. I'll support you in one of them that we decide is going to work, right? I'll support that. But having some escalation path for those things that, hey, even if I support your suggestion, you, the team, or you, the people on the team, actually couldn't make that change. It's a organizational structural change, or it's a, some type of a policy change. There's some status quo that, we're just bumping up against. We're not getting past it. So having some escalation point where we can address that. That's something we need to set up for our teams to be successful. Call it what you want, right? Whether an agile transition team, some type, whatever it is, but that is made up of people who are leading the organization, who own the status quo, who can go in and change the status quo to provide an environment and support that's needed. That's especially important in transitionary stages, which I think we're probably always in that transition stage, trying to move from one point to another of improvement.
And depending on how different what's going on in the team is from the status quo in your organization, I take this portion to really mean protecting them while they're different. So if a corporate policy rolls down and it's not in line with Agile, you've got to intercept it and adjust it. I've seen a ton of Agile teams ruined by corporate non-Agile policies washing down on them.
No one protecting it, yeah.
Yeah, so I talk about putting a change buffer around different. And you really need, as a leader, to establish that, whether it's policies or leadership protections or encouragement to the teams or celebrations of being different. And then as leaders, owning the fact that there are certain things that no team is strong enough to do. They're not going to put in a CI/CD system for you because they've gotten on board with DevOps, right? You got to give them that. But I've seen a ton of folks like hand the Phoenix project to a team and they're like, go. It's like, what? No, you're the leader. You need to do this. You need to invest in this. So we could save a lot of Agile implementations and save a lot of teams if we would be honest about these are leadership's Agile jobs and these are teams' Agile jobs. And unfortunately, I think we jumped a level when everybody went to SAFe. It was like, this is executives' Agile jobs. It's like, wait, there's a whole middle piece of funding the actual infrastructure to make this work. But that's just my opinion.
I think April hit on something very important, which is a leadership understanding of what you're trying to do. Please read April's book about change buffers. Everyone is a change agent. It's the book I hand to my associate project managers and say, read this and you'll be okay. It's not something you're going to learn in a PMBOK or in the Scrum Guide. It's different. And it's so incredibly impactful. And one of the change buffers that you can do for your team if a policy comes down from on high is you can challenge it privately and go to the group that set this and say, hey, our team works a little bit differently. Can we make an adaptation for this? Because policy isn't written with everybody in mind. It's written with a specific use case. And you might have something that's completely valid that keeps your team going, that is nicked in the side by this policy, but they had no idea and they don't intend to slow you down. So, similarly to my last comment, you have to have those conversations and ask and say, is it okay if we do this a little bit differently? Or if not, working with the team saying, okay, this is what we're being asked to do. What can we do to fulfill that requirement while not slowing ourselves down? Sometimes that means you become a translation layer for your team and kind of protect them from something that they don't need to do, but that the business thinks that they want.
Yep. What are some factors you consider important in supporting individuals on the team?
Getting to know them. You have to care deeply as a human. Being at home has shown us that more than ever. We've gotten to know our team's families and their pets, and Smarsh does an engagement survey for employees, telling us how happy our employees are. And one of my absolute most favorite and important questions for myself is, my manager genuinely cares about my well-being. If my team doesn't feel like I genuinely care, there's no way they're going to do anything that we need to do, and they've lost purpose because they don't think I care. Purpose has everything to do with care. And so for me, it's care about your folks, get to know them, respect them as individuals, celebrate them as individuals, and make sure that you're doing that in an equal and supportive way. If you're gonna, this even goes down to, if you're gonna do birthdays, you have to do all the birthdays, not just a couple.
Something I really like what you're saying, Liz. A key thing for me is to make space in your calendar as fast as possible. So I remember a key moment with a friend. He had some feedback. I had some feedback for him, and he made space the very same day. So he made it important to care. To okay, I want to get it, and so I took this practice of okay, I need to talk with my team members. I will do everything to. It's the highest priority ever. My main team, so to say. So this reaction, I've noticed people are wow, it is making it's today, really, yeah, today, yeah. And now, especially that we are all remote, I use the ping pong rule. So instead of chatting a lot, at some time I'm calling people. So at first people were surprised, but I'm calling people all the time. But now people are getting used to it, and then we are in a better shape to daring to just call, and that's fine if people don't reply. And so it shows that, I care and I take the time, and I want to share with you. That really works.
Yeah, I think another important factor is ownership. Somehow showing that you're giving, you want them to have ownership, and doing whatever you can to support them gaining that ownership of what they're doing. Instead of answering their questions all the time, they come to you for help and always giving them the answer. It's providing the right space and questions back, right? To give them ownership back. So that's another thing I think we can do to support everything that's been said. In addition to that, how can I turn ownership more and more over to them rather than them feeling like they have to come to me? They know they can come to me, but they come to me, they know they're going to walk away with more ownership than before when they came to me.
I think one of the words that people kind of shy away from, that is a big piece of all this, and especially of trust, is accountability. So building relationships and being able to know what people like to do and how they work and all of that, and then being able to hold them accountable for the work that they do. A lot of leaders don't understand how, if you don't hold someone accountable, it erodes trust in the rest of the team.
So incredibly true.
And sadly, it doesn't take many cycles of we're all going to do this and 2 people don't. And by the second time, if you had 10 people, the first time 8 finished, 2 don't get held accountable. The next time 5 people finish, and by the third pass, no one's doing it. So it's a fast slide down that hill. That's why I encourage folks, unless you mean to enforce it, don't make anything mandatory. And the best way to get people to comply with it is to do it yourself. So I went to training, here's what I got out of it, but I'm eager to hear what you got out of it. You're much more likely to get people to complete the training than we have mandatory training, it's due on Tuesday.
I love that. I hear so many times about people that are told training's mandatory and go get it done, and 80% of the people, by the time the deadline rolls around, haven't done it. So they're now trying to figure out, okay, how do I get out of my project work so that I can get my training done so that I meet the metric for that, so that I don't miss my extra payment.
Yeah. And if you looked at the actual completion list, because I used to police training, the senior leaders are the least likely to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it always just infuriated me. It's like, you have time to send emails, just do it. And then tell people you did it.
And what you got out of it.
Yeah. Oh, so powerful. Because people want to know what the boss knows. So if you're a leader and you're not doing that, you're leaving influence on the table that is sitting there.
The other thing, the other side of this is when you don't in some way make the training, people understand that they have to do the training, then they don't do the training. Coming from the training world, when I work with organizations who want to put training programs into place, but they don't make it mandatory, then people don't sign up, especially if the senior leaders don't do it as well.
Yeah, you can have the best training in the world, but if you don't understand why, it goes back to the earlier point of what's the visible why that I need to take this training. It's easy to blow it off.
No.
Yeah, I've also had managers that have to do the training, but always we'll talk about, but it only took me 15 minutes, right? And then you're like, well, when you get into it and your 15 minutes have gone by and you're like a quarter of the way done, you're like, I don't understand exactly how you really did this. So you kind of, it makes you feel like it's not valued or important. And so that's the other extreme, I guess.
Yeah. I think with training, there's a couple different types of training. There's compliance training. We all have to do the phishing games, right? Which emails do you click on? Answer, none of them. And then there's training that can help you get better at your job. And I don't ever require folks to take training that'll help them get better at their job, because they're going to be that prisoner in that training. You want people that want to be there. They're going to get much more out of it. And if you have prisoners, they're actually going to negatively impact the learning experience of other people. So the people that do really want to be there are going to get less. So you might have training in your budget, but if your team doesn't actually want to learn anything, I don't dictate what they learn. They have to go find it. I say, you have this amount of money if you want to go learn something. If you don't, well, I'll go learn something. But making it, they have to seek it out, and they have to say, I want to learn this, and I think this is what I'm going to get out of it, and it's going to make me better at my job. That's purpose for them, right? As Steve was talking about, that's purpose. I want to get better at my job, which is a mastery thing. So it's both.
Does recognition play any part in environment and support?
Depends on the person.
Well, and then we have to define, right, that range of recognition.
Yes.
Because if you only define recognition as dollars in the paycheck and say once a year, you're missing a whole range of opportunities. And it is very specific, right? The best question to ask people is, how do you like to be recognized or rewarded? I had 9 engineers worked for me at one point. One of them said, I want to hear that my peers think I'm awesome. I really don't care what your opinion of me is, boss, but if that other engineer thinks I'm awesome, that matters. Another said, if you ask me to teach it, that's the greatest honor. And one guy said, I want the trophy and to be up on stage. And I said, well, then you got to work harder. And so it's really important to just ask directly those questions, because oftentimes we'll think, well, you'll like to get what I like to get. And if anybody's ever given their partner a gift you would have loved that they hated, you know how foolhardy it is to guess if you don't have to. So just ask.
Yeah, recognition is a very individualized thing. And Liz, when you were talking about I don't know what happened there. When you were talking about knowing your people, that's part of what you need to know about them. You know, do you want me to say, when you did this during this project, I was really, really impressed? Or do you want me to get on the stage and tell everybody else that I was impressed? And just a huge difference in the way that people want to be recognized, and knowing them is the big piece of that.
I think this is something, thank you, Robin, so much. I think this is something that CEOs get wrong. They think everyone wants to be dragged on stage and cheered for. And for some people, that's the worst thing that could possibly happen. So if you're recognizing someone, how do you do it in a way that they actually feel good about it? And thank you, Robin. That's exactly it. Just ask them.
I would say, well, maybe not to be absolute, but I think in most cases, though, at the very least, even in a one-on-one saying, I noticed what you did and it was great and I really appreciate that. At the very least, we won't go wrong with that.
Yeah, I wanted to say thank you. It's really so basic, but so powerful. Many times I recall some retrospective where I knew that it was difficult for a team member to share something, and I took the time to say thank you you did great. It was beyond you did great. It was more like you've made the effort, and I thank you for that because I knew that you had it. And yeah, I was giving on Tuesday some kind of a recap of a training. And at the end, I was a bit frustrated because like I made a huge effort to put it in my calendar. And I received a few thank yous, but not from everyone. And that sucks a bit, honestly. When you've made a big effort, thank you really doesn't cost you much. And that kills motivation, to be honest. And I received some, so I know I don't have to rely on that, but I felt the effect of being a bit like, huh, you know, they didn't realize the effort that I've made there.
I think it's really important when you recognize people, when you say thank you, to be very, very specific about it. Because if you just say, hey, thanks, you did a great job. Well, what was it about what I did that was so great? Help me to know what that is. Because if you say, oh, you did a great job too many times, then it becomes not anything.
Has anyone
Yeah, thank you for that, Robin. That's substantiated in research. That if you're not specific, it has far less meaning and far less impact.
There's a book by Kim Scott called Radical Candor. Have we heard of this? Yeah. Positive, specific, and positive, negative, super duper important. And what I've seen happen is that, hey, that was so great. Thank you. Did you listen? What about it? And sometimes they can't tell you. Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. That might be the one that is the one I lent you. It has my name on the top.
Awesome.
Great read.
So I know we've kind of drifted towards what are negative factors that might detract from the environment or the support. Do we want to explore that a little bit further? What are some things that might occur in the environment that would cause demotivation or development of lack of trust?
I think Liz talked about, the CEO giving specific information or praise or something like that. Anything that comes from up above that maybe doesn't connect to what you're doing, it becomes so much more important for you to be able to connect people. And frankly, people leave jobs because of their direct supervisor, not necessarily those above that person.
I've got a client I'm working with right now, and the CIO and the senior managers are really excited about getting the teams to where they're doing Scrum, where they're operating in an agile way. And they've kind of latched on to some of these terms that are kind of convenient and resonate with them. And one of the things that they're doing that is killing motivation is they're taking this concept of a regular retrospective, and anytime something goes wrong, they call for a retrospective. And so now it's getting this connotation of, hey, they're saying they want to try to help make improvements, but really it's a blame game. And so the blame game, only looking to provide feedback when things don't go well. This goes back to what someone said earlier, right? Yeah, it's killing things in a way. And I did bring it up. I did do my job and I brought it up. And so we're addressing that.
And I like to use the metaphor for folks of a bucket, right? And motivation is a bucket filled with the liquid of motivation. And oftentimes we're trying really hard to pour more motivation in. There's, we're doing social hours and we're doing gamification and we're doing this and that and the other thing to try and pour more motivation in. But Steve, to your point, you can't get ahead when you're drilling holes in the bottom of the bucket and just draining motivation out faster. So I find a ton of organizations that are exhausted because they think I'm doing all this to try and go faster, when it turns out that if you stopped doing these other things, you'd go a ton faster. But we usually think we have to start in order to speed up, not stop in order to speed up. So if that metaphor helps you with conversations, leverage it.
Your metaphor reminded me of a metaphor that we use for trust, and that's the trust bank account. So when you make deposits, you're making deposits all along. The minute you make a withdrawal, it's the whole thing is gone, and you get all these fees on top of it. Then you have to, it's a hard road back.
You can also start over. If you lost trust, you can still restart. You can still show that you care. You can have this a moment like that to be conscious and doing it, creating a new start. You know, like the recent book actually also from Pink, when is to recreate the moment of magic or celebration. Maybe we didn't talk about celebration, and you can make that happen purposely also.
Yeah,
So
and honoring that asymmetry is just really vital, right? And an ounce of extra can save so much compared to that little break in trust, or that little break in motivation, or that little break in the environment where you finally got them to the point where they're protecting me. I can go and be different, and then something comes in and hits them, and you're back to square one, unfortunately.
I think this is where getting to personal, so knowing your people. By definition, I'm not saying that we all need to be friends, but at least when you have a good connection with everyone, you will care for that, and then you will always kind of protect those one-on-one interactions with people. I have a really good friend in a team, and I invested even more in him because we had this connection. And I don't have the same connection with everyone, of course, but I realized that I could dare more. I remember I wrote him some messages, okay, are you here to make your point or collaborate? And he was like, okay, shit, he's talking to me. And then we reach another point of trust. So we build on that kind of. So getting close to your teammates basically will force you in the mindset of investing because you care, because you're connected to them.
I want to add something that's specific to being at home and caring about your folks deeply. I actually have been able to have deeper, more important discussions with my direct reports as we've been at home on video calls. We do one-on-ones weekly and they happen in the office, and sometimes they happen in an open space or in a conference room, and there's people walking by and interruptions and stuff's happening all day. But really getting to know folks has happened very rapidly for me at home, because it's one-on-one. It's only us. You can say anything to me. I'm the only one that's going to know. And that has actually, I put this in the chat as well, vulnerability. Being at home, saying, hey, I haven't eaten yet. Do you mind if I eat my sandwich? Showing that we're real humans, hopefully and thankfully. That breeds trust. And as we were talking, give trust to get trust. To be vulnerable, you have to trust that other person. So you have to give them that trust and being vulnerable to get trust back.
Curious.
I've ever
Speaking
heard.
of that, I was making faces because my kids were saying, "You're done now, right?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not done yet. So go away." If you guys were wondering why was I making funny faces, forgive me.
Speaking of that, sometimes I've heard people say this as they become new bosses, or they hire people new into their teams, and they say, "You'll get my respect when you earn it." It never works that way. Respect is something you give, and then it builds respect in the relationship.
I'm curious how people feel about, so we've talked a lot about trust, and then, kind of cultivating a supportive environment, and a lot of good, topics. And I'm wondering people's experience with competition and like competitive teams, because I certainly have seen, like, particularly like that trust between teams all working together on a project and having this competition and having management, kind of talk about who's getting credit for stuff and this kind of a dynamic. And it really didn't facilitate trust in my experience. And I'll admit that I'm not a competitive person, and I felt compelled in that environment to tell people somewhat regularly that that's my personality type, just to kind of make it clear. At least if you say it, people have heard it, and then you can have see where it goes from there. But have other people seen success with a very trusting environment that's hyper competitive?
Typically not.
Yeah, I haven't either.
Yeah, I mean,
So.
The competitive piece is a piece of entrepreneurship, but at a certain point you need to make that change to being more collaborative with other people. If you're the person who came up with the idea, you're only going to get so far. And it works, of course, in sales organizations, but only because salespeople tend to be more motivated by that competitive feature of their personality.
There's a great book. It's several years old now, called Tribal Leadership, and it talks about different stages of leadership. And it's great because the I'm great and you're not is a bad level to leave people or teams at. You can get sometimes to we're great and they're not. And ideally, if it's like we being our company and they being the competition, maybe that can function. But the highest level they talk about is life is great. And companies and teams in that space are competing against, say, if you're in drug manufacturing, they're competing against rheumatoid arthritis is their competitor, not the other drug company. And I think that that's a great way of building in the positive nature of competition into these teams, which is we're competing against what this enterprise architecture and code base can do in service to our customers. So it's us against the limits of the code instead of us against team alpha over there, and we're team beta, and they named us beta on purpose as a smear, and leaders can drive that out and compete against the limits of nature, not each other.
So Tribal Leadership is a great book. And when they first wrote the book, they only had 4 levels. And then they went to Amgen and interviewed the Amgen employees, and they asked them what their purpose was, and their purpose wasn't to beat any competition, it was to beat cancer. And they were like, oh my gosh, we have a whole new level of culture here. So if anybody wants the book, I have a lot of them, so connect with me.
I'd like one.
I feel like there's a resources page that comes out of this talk.
I'll put my email in the chat, and you guys can just connect with me by email, and I'll get a book to you.
Sounds like a future webinar we need to do on leveraging tribal leadership to build great teams.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not the book from Phil Jackson, right? 11 Rings. It's not this one.
No, it's Dave Logan, and
okay.
I can't remember the other people.
Because in his book, Phil Jackson is maybe one of my favorite books. So Phil Jackson, I guess maybe some of you watched The Last Dance on Netflix. And basically Phil Jackson, it's a book about tribal leadership, basically. And so what he used was to be the best team that ever existed. And I've used that also in some teams, and I've also used complexity to kind of picture complexity as some kind of a dangerous beast, to say, okay, we fight against that. We have to manage that, and that worked. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Dave, you had something you put in the chat a minute ago. Do you want to expound on that a bit?
Oh, yeah, it just amplify what's already gone by there about keeping the competition focus outside the organization, at a higher goal, something really inspiring, or competition or other products in your space, any of that seems to work, but keep it out of competing, making it a zero-sum game internally. That's what you're trying to avoid. I think that's the net of it. That resonate? I'm seeing some nods here. So
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've seen, it's things like, instead of people finding mistakes and that being shared with the team, for example, seeing people sit on these things, and then, it's just like a ticking time bomb, whatever. And so there's a lot of dynamics I've noticed around this, and that have been unhealthy for teams I've been on.
One really, really healthy environment that I had the pleasure of experiencing was, we all know Second Life. Linden Lab is the company, right? Mm-hmm. I worked there, and it was kind of a zany place in terms of their internal culture, and some of it's reflected in their product. And the one thing that was really a positive cultural element there was they had Shrek ears. And there were Shrek ears hanging on the wall on a nail. And so when someone screwed up and brought down a section of the world or something like that, they could elect to go put on the Shrek ears and wear them for the day. And it was not something that could be assigned. No one, and it was a very interesting dynamic because it fostered a lot of conversation, and it tended to neutralize the harsh criticism. Right. So, I screwed up. I put them on. A lot of people are asking me, why are you wearing them? Oh, are you responsible for bringing down a quarter of the world? Okay. What was that all about? And so there's a lot of opportunity for learning in the organization as a result of those Shrek ears. And while odd, and the organization was odd, it was very effective.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting dynamic of opening that conversation window to say, yes, I made a mistake, and I'm happy to talk to you about it so that we can share and learn from it. That's a key difference from, oh, you screwed up and you're to blame for taking down the network.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the net effect was it was a very powerful learning tool, right?
I wish more people would share things they've screwed up or made mistakes on, because we learn from those things. We don't really learn by you telling us everything went well.
Yes.
We congratulate you, great, but we don't get a lesson out of that. So David, I think that zany spot sounds amazing in that way. And I would want to learn from that person. Tell me what went wrong so that we can avoid it next time, because insanity is making the same mistake twice.
That same organization had the love machine. And it was a way of recognizing someone else. And another very positive cultural element in that company. Anyone in the organization could write a love that would recognize someone else for anything, and you didn't have to get an approval to submit the love, and the love flowed freely between people. And by the way, you got $5 per love. It's just kind of a token that you got to check at the end of the quarter. It's almost inconsequential. But those loves went across a corporate dashboard so that it was visible to everyone. And you could just simply explain, thanks for helping me find the book that I lost. It could be trivial. And so one concern that I've often heard expressed when I describe this is, well, can it be gamed? Well, transparency is your friend. So if two people are gaming it to get the $5, it's going to be pretty evident, right? People are going to see that because it's flowing across the corporate dashboard. And so probably was gamed to some extent, but I think it's probably a real small percentage of the time. But it was powerful, culturally powerful in the organization, those two things.
Gaming is a small price to pay at the $25 a month price.
Right.
For recognition that goes broadly across the entire organization. That's probably not a bad thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's an aspect too that I always like to bring up, especially to software teams, because they're so integral into the design of the product. Which is Don Norman, the grandfather of user experience, said, most of the errors are in the design; they're not in the people. Deming said the similar thing. So we have a ton of opportunity of looking for failures as design glitches, not individual failures. So if you can recast it of show me how the UI led you to click and destroy a quarter of the world instead of submit, or show me our tool glitches, show me all these things. We've got eyes to see this because we're designing. So who are we not to fix it? So you can sometimes turn it around that way too, of, show me how it led you the wrong place. I'm going to assume the tool caused it. Yeah. And let's make it work.
All right. In the last couple minutes here, I wanted to ask if I noticed that Jennifer's been sharing in the chat some of the key points that she had brought out or captured along the way. Does anybody else have others that were different or others that they want to share? I'm going to kind of open it up to the floor and let it go to anybody that wants to share examples of how you've seen this principle be applied in your environment, both successfully and unsuccessfully.
I have an unsuccessful example. And this occurred in a small team project where we had some delays in getting started. And so while we were waiting for the software that we needed to get started on the initial project, I noticed some things in some of the preliminary materials that I was reviewing that needed to be updated. And so I had requested the request of the project manager, I was not the project manager on that one, to facilitate in making that happen. But in so doing, I didn't take some of these steps here, which is if you need help, ask for it, and laying that groundwork up front and help other people if they need your help when you're on the team. And she didn't understand the importance of helping other people and was the only one in a situation to be able to help me in real time do the thing that I needed. And because of that, she agreed to it, but just didn't do it, ignored my Slack messages when I was like, I'm waiting, I'm needing this. So it doesn't impede the progress of others who are waiting on the material. And she just didn't understand it. And it was sort of a kind of a blow up situation for her too, because she was like, why were you bugging me? And because I really depended on you when you said you were going to do it. And I, in retrospect, it really boiled down to, at the beginning of our project, getting that commitment and that buy-in from everyone on the team, including her, that we would help each other when we needed help, even if it wasn't in our immediate job description. Part of that Agile methodology.
Yep.
Oh, you mean things like team agreements are important to this
Yes.
principle?
Indeed.
That actually brings up an interesting point, and that is, what part do team agreements play in this environment and supporting this principle in particular?
I can add something about as soon as the lockdown started in our company or in Switzerland, first day I was okay, let's write down remote team agreements. And what was amazing is that at the end of the session, we had a team agreement that we accepted a response time of more than maximum 2 hours. And I found it really interesting to kind of, we could think we are all remote behind our computers, so we kind of could expect quick answers. But then to reverse that, to say, no, that's okay that we wait for 2 hours, that helped us tremendously to be able to work together. And we've done that day one, and we had a really, really natural transition, and it worked really well.
So Leo, the audio wasn't really perfect. Are you saying that you established that the SLA would not be would be greater than 2 hours?
We established we agreed on accepting that people won't reply. They have time to reply, basically. That we don't expect right away answers.
Okay.
Quick. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Maximum 2 hours to reply.
Great.
And so it applies also to change meetings during the day, which can lead to problems. And also when we work together, of course, there are some people when we work on something, when we are pairing, of course. But then to acknowledge that we cannot expect people to reply right away, that was cool.
Thank you.
That's great trust. I mean, in your team too. I mean, you're going to feel like you're trusted that you get your stuff done, and you know, when you're given that, yeah.
Anybody else want to jump in, chime in?
I had a question. Does anybody here use like resolutions or statements as part of their retrospectives? Meaning kind of setting the tone for the team expectations of the retrospective, rather than it being, you know, as Mr. Ostermiller pointed out, reactive. Because I know a lot of people use the firefighters code.
Yeah.
A lot of people, you know, stuff like that. I was wondering about that.
Are you talking about we did the best we could with what we had?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I repeat it every time, regardless if I'd done it last time or if the team's heard it before, because it's a good reminder.
Right. Okay. I was curious about that.
Who else?
It's a good way to have it on the screen if you have some slides going or something like that. But yeah, get it out in front of the team every time.
Mm-hmm.
Any key thoughts our panelists want to share in wrapping up? We have about 2 minutes left.
I want to thank you, Neil, for bringing us together and organizing this chat.
Yeah. And,
Yes,
and Neil's got the awesome background now, so he's the true DJ.
Hey.
I appreciate the opportunity to join you guys from Utah as well. I run the Utah Agile group here. We're about 1,200 people in the Utah area, and it's really good to jump in and share with another regional community. So thanks for that.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. Also for me, I feel like really humbled And I learned a lot in the process. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for being up early, late, whatever time it is. Thank you. I'm sure it's not an ideal time.
Happy to be here.
What is it, about 4 o'clock in the morning your time, Leo?
In 1 minute, yes.
Oh my
Yes.
God.
Well, thank you for
Awesome.
getting up. It was
Yeah.
much
Awesome.
appreciated.
These kind of things don't happen without someone's concerted effort. So thank you, Neil, and certainly thank you, panelists tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Neil.
Definitely turned out way better than I anticipated it could have gone. So really appreciate all you guys participating and joining in. And once again, I would like to offer it if anybody is hiring and anybody's looking for a job. Happy to have a breakout room where you can get together and just connect and exchange data or whatever.